fellow heroes, and if you haven't already noticed, Wizards of the Coast have decided to put out a new image for Dungeons and Dragons that has had people kind of going back and forth, but for the most part, not too excited or happy with what's going on. I myself had an initial negative reaction to this as well, because this doesn't really feel like the Dungeons and Dragons that is being catered towards me, and mostly being catered towards a different audience. Now, I want to go into what's going on here and how people feel about it and how I myself feel about it, but I will say that by excluding your core audience or what your core audience used to like, you are alienating them and choosing a different audience and going to lose what you used to have and potentially never gain what you're trying to go after in the first place. Now, this right here is a scene that definitely represents more of inclusivity and diversity. And ironically enough, it looks like a bunch of people. It just doesn't feel like a fantasy realm that is struggling to coexist with each other. Everyone looks the same. There's no difference from this human to this tiefling to this halfling to this orc. They all just feel like people. They don't feel diverse at all. And I think that's the true irony behind this song. But not only that, people are missing what D&D used to look like, the metal hardcore version, as you can see right here, what beholders should be doing and what they're actually doing in this picture, being just all smiles and hearts in the eyes. And you have right here, I've seen the hentai monster in this background, and the only time it smiles is when something bad is about to happening. So I can only assume this will lead to a very dark story. It is interesting that a beholder's here, and it's all out of place, and it's all in the name of including others. But yet the core audience does not feel included, as this is what we used to have and what we really liked. And honestly, why does everything in D&D look so gay, says Fenrir Ice Wolf. I don't mean gay as in homosexual, I mean gay as lame as hell. And honestly, I think it fits both categories. Seriously, who wants to live in a world that's just downtown LA, domestic dragons? People want adventure and danger. And I think that's true. People want adventure, people want adversity, people want strife. And by doing something like this, by trying so hard to include people, you actually not only, like I said before, alienate the core audience, but you alienate and you take away from what the core gameplay is going to be. Now, this isn't being against women or anything like this. Aesthetically, of course, a bunch of guys are going to look at this and say, we love women. And I think a lot of the audience for D&D would enjoy something like this. And you see right here, forget that D&D for feminists and soy boys. This is what true D&D looks like. What's funny is D&D is always perceived as a hobby for wimpy little nerds until leftist identity politics took over, and now original D&D is seen as base now. And that is an interesting take. That something that was considered for nerds and losers now is something that's considered base. But what is the counter side? What are other people saying about this? Well, it's your story to tell. And I agree with this. Just because this picture here is depicting a bunch of inclusivity and everyone getting along and a gay marriage and kobolds dancing with trans-colored maracas, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a beholder behold your wedding or a wedding. And while this may contain dragons, there are no dungeons, so you don't have to follow that. The entire point of D&D is that the DM creates a story. No one is forcing the story to be woke. The rightoids getting mad at this are unironically a bunch of tourists. Now, I think I agreed for the most part up until the part where they say they're a bunch of tourists. And you are essentially hurting the game by going in this direction. And I do have examples like that. By wanting to present this type of game, you are asking for this type of audience to play this game. And that audience may also want these themes of being included and lack of adversity to be resonated within the actual way you play the game itself, which means that rules that get updated or changed will reflect this type of audience and not this type of audience. An audience that wants to wear bikini armor, take the debuff in armor, and just go to town playing on hard mode because of it. And it begs the question. Well, first let me read this. God, the comments, not gonna lie. I see people like this when I talk about wobbles. I don't know what that is. At cons. There's the one that get it and the cozy cuteness that D&D can be, and the others that say, I'm gonna lure my players with this slime and kill them. Yeah, and it's kind of the same sentiment. Make the story you want to make. No, and some of the comments that come here is, no, there's some of the originators of the hobby, and they're right. This is objectively shit. And he's right. D&D wouldn't have gotten this far. D&D wouldn't be accessible to so many people if the people from 20 years ago didn't just 30 years ago didn't continue to hold on to it. So they're not tourists. They're the reason that you're able to call them tourist is because they played the game for so long. Real D&D fans are actually annoyed this isn't gay enough, and sorry, I can feel that there. But hey, I'm Mario. I like playing video games, watching movies, and Dungeons and Dragons. If you keep getting me in your suggested videos, or you're watching this video right here, consider subscribing. It goes a long way. Thank you. When we look at this, behold our newest ad campaign. Are you sure this will help us sell more tabletop games? Tabletop games? And I think this is on point. What are you actually trying to sell here? Why aren't you introducing new mechanics? Why aren't you introducing new creatures or enemies or ways to play? Why aren't you teasing at that? Why are you teasing at a gay wedding or a gay love? Or to me, this comes off as a wedding, but I guess it could just be people dancing around. But it looks like a festivity, and these two are sharing it, but it could be anything else. I'm just now kind of realizing that. But why is this showing off? Because you're trying to sell or face yourself. You're trying to sell the fact that you want people to think that you're inclusive. And if you're going to sell that, this has been a campaign that's been going on for a while for Wizards of the Coast, addressing racist stereotypes in Dungeons and Dragons. What racist stereotypes? When Dungeons and Dragons went woke with things like orcs and drow can't be evil. This is ridiculous. Or removing racial traits because, large muscular race wouldn't have any advantages over little skinny ones. Did most of the D&D audience agree with this? This happened 2 to 5 years ago, and they are continuing on this path of making everything inclusive and woke. And by doing something like this, you are hurting the core of the game. I think it's okay if you don't want orcs and drows to be evil. This goes back to this same point right back here. It's your story to tell. Tell that story. You don't have to have evil orcs or evil drows. But if the reason for Wizard of the Coast to change the lore of orcs and drow is because you're comparing them to black people or other minorities, I don't know what is worse. The idea that you are trying to be inclusive and change things, or the fact that you see a drow and you think of them as a black person. It is okay to have a race or a species, for what most of these races are, to be different, to be inherently evil, to have a story of that type of bad morality, so it's just easier for characters to let loose. If you have a game where everyone is just a person, that's when you create murder hobos. When is it ever appropriate for people to attack? And yes, it comes down to the story, and if the DM's able to tell a certain story, but at some points, not everyone is a fantastic storyteller. Not everyone wants to be a DM and just wants to be able to say, hey, you can kill these guys, they're evil. But again, that doesn't necessarily affect it. But whenever you go and you change the stats and you say a halfling can have the same stats as an orc or a half giant, you're now creating something that's just not true, and you're getting rid of that adversity. You're getting rid of, hey, I'm going to make a halfling barbarian, and I'm going to, because my racial stats limit me, it's going to be that much more fulfilling and satisfying whenever I do dump those extra stats and those feats into strength to turn into that barbarian halfling that I'm dreaming of. Whereas now it's just, oh, well, you get to put 2 points wherever you want. You get to put your points however you want. There's no racial things because all races are equal now. When that just isn't the case. And playing a game and making a character that doesn't start off on equal footing as someone else, but then training them and grinding and getting to that point is part of the fun of the game. And when you take that away, you're taking away the really what D&D is and what kept D&D alive for so long. Now, what does this look like? Because I've kind of hinted at it here and there. Well, I talk about how the game gets hurt. You look at this for a fighter, you have the mind of attack, and this is for the newest edition of the player's handbook and the new characters and the new character classes. And for fighter, the most updated version, you have the mind of Taxis off the battlefield. When you fail an ability check, you can expend the use of your second wind to push yourself towards success. Rather than regaining hit points, you roll a 1d10 and add the number rolled to the ability check. That's really cool. Makes you feel really powerful. You get this at level 2. That is kind of crazy. Cool. Potentially turning it into success. If the check still fails, this use of second wind isn't expended. And that's where it bothers me. That's where you're catering towards the inclusivity. That's where you're catering towards, no issues happening. Just like a couple years ago where they got rid of the racial stats. Now they're making just the character class stats have less consequences. And those consequences should exist. There should be grind. There should be parts of the game that make you hesitant to use something because you don't know how much you're going to need it later. You should have strife when you're playing D&D, and it shouldn't just come from the dice. It should come from the decision making and the class building and the way you use your abilities. All of it should come out on top, and you should come out on the other side feeling a lot more stronger or better about the decisions you made through the consequences of your actions because you've learned. Now, you look at another character, you look at the paladin, you look at the hunter, you always have Hunter's Mark. Spell prepared. You can cast it twice without expending a spell slot, and you regain all expended use of this ability when you finish a long rest. Again, another thing where it's like, why are they making Hunter's Mark just more accessible? Why not just make, if you want me to use Hunter's Mark, just make it a better spell. Don't take away the consequences, just make it worth using over other spells. And I get it, like this is kind of it, but they don't just do this with rangers. They did this with paladins as well, with I think it was with their smites or with another radiant abilities that they have. You're seeing this thing where it's like you do something and there's a lack of consequences in the game, and it's all coming back to this. It's all because now this is your target audience. You're no longer catering to this audience who wants the badassery and the difficulty and the strife and the adversity and the racial stats so that they can turn their halfling into a barbarian and be proud of it. No, you want this crowd who thinks that a halfling is no different than this giant buff tiefling and ignores the fact that this tiefling probably had to work really hard to get those muscles, and it's just like, no, I'm going to take my racial stats and put them right into strength no matter what. I mean, really think about this. Look at 3.5. Look at what we used to have in the old edition. Look at how this is the barbarian. Illiteracy. Barbarians are the only characters who do not automatically know how to read and write. Barbarians may spend 2 skill points to gain the ability to read and write all languages he is able to speak. A barbarian, you just by picking the class barbarian, you are given a setback. You know what this immediately makes me think of? Makes me think of Vikings. Like, Vikings didn't really have a written language. They had runes and carvings, but they didn't have paper. They didn't have books. They didn't have any need to write down stuff. They went to across the friggin' ocean, after the Christians who did write stuff down and just took everything that they wanted because that's what worked for them, because books didn't teach them anything, taking gold did, and being better at combat helped them more. And that, to me, is the biggest irony. By taking away adversity, you are taking away what makes people diverse. You're taking away diversity by taking away adversity. And a world that accepts everyone, a world that sees everyone as equal, means that there is no one actually being included. You're actually excluding the people who do struggle and who have history and who have cultures and who who want to incorporate their culture into other people's societies, like a barbarian who never had to learn how to read but chooses to read. And the character writing is built into the mechanics of the game itself. And yet when you get rid of that, when you make it to where there are no consequences, there is no adversity in the game, you lose what originally made so many people fall in love with the game in the first place and kept it alive for so long. Tell me what you guys think. If you don't care about any of this, if you're just like going back and playing the old editions, because I truly think that, you know, as fun as it is to pull up the old archives, the Elder Scroll of what the rules used to be, it'd be cool if those rules were getting updates. You know, it'd be cool if there was a dedicated company that was updating the rules that we fell in love with, the rules that kept this game alive to begin with, and they weren't just making rules to cater to new players, new audience members, and taking the old ones for granted. Because whenever you do make those new rules, you're assuming your old audience is just staying. When instead, you take care of your old audience, you bring people in, you show them why we fell in love with it, and you continue to update the rules that we like, that we fell in love with. And you can have a game that could last forever. Anyways, what's your guys' story? You like this? You prefer the barbarian bikini armor? Or you prefer Beholder with hearts in his eyes? You just don't care. Until next time, guys, play nice.